Good morning, friends. This is Hank, your Pajama Scholar, with an AGR at 6:23. Well, I'm sure you're all looking forward to this. But so I don't mislead you, I've already misled. The actual title of this AGR is called Lamp of the Eye. And I have my reasons for this. Because I believe if you read the description, you'll find it misleading. Insofar as I don't have any intention to be particularly hateful. I would like, maybe perhaps, to be able to do that, but it's just not in my heart. The world has enough animosity in it, and quite frankly, I'm not very good at being hateful. Like, the things that piss me off. We'll get into that a little bit. I'll give you an example of just a moment I flew into a rage today, and it was I don't think it was like one of those keywords that you could just plug in, like that I would find particularly offensive, that actually angered me, and angered me to a point where I was embarrassed at my own lack of self-control. A silly thing inflames the passions. It's something that keywords, simple phrases, I mean, I literally would have to research it. I have to go and look it up, find a bunch of different racial epithets, put it all together. I mean, in the title I suggest all sorts of different types of ways that I could be extremely hateful. But it's just not in my heart. I find it more insulting to be censored for so-called hate speech when it's not hateful at all. That pisses me off. Not the fucking words people say, but the shit people do. I mean, some things sometimes people can say some really things that really piss me off. Like I lost my temper, I don't know, about 2 weeks ago. Brent0331 was doing a live stream with a pretty cool panel. It's himself, this guy from Pegasus Tests, I forget what his name is, Doc Larson, and I want to say Bruce. Boy, did Doc Larson piss me off. Pissed me off so bad, but I was getting drunk. I mean, I was fucking thoroughly drunk. Pissed me off so bad. Because we had just gotten out of Afghanistan. I mean, like that fucking week the war was over. And already he was talking some shit about another fucking war. And I was about to lose my damn mind. And I was fucking with him. Yeah. Telling him like his house looked like the inside of a Korean restaurant. Like a fucking, he's sitting there in front of a motherfucking barbecue joint. A Korean barbecue joint. Yellow walls and shit. But there is some justice in the world. A neighbor of mine left me a bottle of beet juice and a bag of mint chocolates. And in my haste and drunkenness, I think first I punched a hole in the wall. I'm fucking furious. Then I opened the door to go out, kind of just, relax a minute, take a fucking deep breath, look at the stars, calm down, calm down. Found that beet juice, those mint chocolates. And I admit, there's a complexity of notes between beet juice and chocolates with like the mint inside that just don't harmoniously play together. So I took that beet juice and chugged it. I mean, almost like the entire bottle. And the body can just not handle shit like that. Beet juice is kind of like one of those things you gotta sip on. And it'll give you an incredible amount of energy. And it can, in a way, like, change your state of drunkenness. Like fruit or tea. But you definitely want to stay away from sugar, like chocolate. And don't mix things like mint and beet juice. I was so drunk on drinking that beet juice. I shit the bed. I vomited this bright beet juice all over the ground. I had a bucket next to the bed. Oh, I missed that. Kept having to run to the bathroom. I had the runs. Puking and shitting at the same time. Oh, fucking. And the next day, I was expected to pick up my girlfriend from the airport and have the house in order, kind of neat. Boy, did I fuck that one up. Just an inopportune time to really fuck everything up. I mean, it was a disaster. Shit, like, couldn't even wear a pair of pants because I've shit myself so much. So there's shit all over the floor as I'm shitting myself on the way to the bathroom. Vomiting at the same time, but bright red beet juice. Violently ill. And I had to, retreat into prayer. Because I was like, when will this ever end? This nightmare is never going to end. And you always try and relax yourself. And it's best just to go into prayer and just continue to pray. And boy, I tell you, it's a real test. It's a real mental and spiritual test when you're feeling poorly to stay in a mindful, prayerful state. But it's the only way to get through. Sometimes. And then the body reacts, and then you get up and, shit the floor, shit the bed. Purge. But it wasn't hate speech that pissed me off. He didn't say anything racial to piss me off. He wasn't offending me personally. I just found the idea that anybody with two brain cells to rub together could possibly fathom talking about another fucking war. After we had just gone through 20 years of war, trying to find some way to start to heal the wounds of this perpetual war that we've been experiencing our entire fucking lives. The bullshit and the lies that were stacked miles high to get us into that war. And for what precisely nobody can particularly be clear about. You know, I've speculated on it quite a bit. Because my whole thing is I just don't want another American to stick a gun in his mouth and pull the trigger like he's some kind of asshole. So yeah, I deceived you in the title. I deceived you in the description. But what's more hateful? You know, what's the greater level of hate and deceit? Well, it would be by those assholes that get you into wars and conflicts, lies. They put you in a perpetual state of fear and unease. And I'll get in maybe into some issues that I have with some particular perspectives espoused by some people that I have a great deal of respect for. We just disagree. And I might get into that, I might not. But the reason that I titled this particular episode Lamp of the Eye is because it's more about how hatred and fear are tools that are used to blind you. And I recall actually this being written about in The Art of War. Let's see if I can find it. Look it up this specifically. I think Sun Tzu speaks of, provoke him if he can be angered. If he's committed to dying, let him die. If he's committed to live, then he'll surrender and he can be captured. If he is I think he says something like concerned with the people, he will be disturbed. So he actually lists like several different principles when it comes to knowing the condition or the state of. In his case, it would be enemy. In my case, it would be just, well, an observation of the state of people. Jesus Christ really had it right, of course. When he says to love thy neighbor, like, you got to put up with some bullshit sometimes, for sure. But I know I've spoke before about an instance I had a run-in with or whatever, and then how I changed my attitude towards loving my neighbor, and how that created a condition where I have better neighbors. I mean, and it was as simple as that. And because I live in an apartment, there is a nature to it where I'm going to get new neighbors all the time. They're going to come and they're going to go. They're going to come and they're going to go. And I'm going to have to learn how to deal with that particular person or people. in all kind of different circumstances and walks of life. And I can be somewhat comfortable in the knowledge that, well, even if I don't like them, all I have to do is be patient, and eventually they'll be gone. Now I'm gonna drink this. Probably have another drink. And I'm gonna give you the outline today, and I actually think we're gonna end up sticking to this outline. Because we're gonna talk about that explosion of irritation that I had. Considerations of distracting, the virtue or benefits of having clarity of mind, or lamp of the eye. And then how I deal with the community around me to change, well, basically to have a way of life that we all enjoy. I talk a little bit about, I'm going to talk about some conflict resolution and how different types of groupings affect different types of psychology in combat. Maybe a little bit about initiative, mass murderers, spree killers. And then probably what I consider to be, if you're going to, if your intention, it will basically to have the correct state of mind, the correct intention, the correct stance, the correct bearing, and how you can hold yourself to a more correct bearing. And then also then maybe we'll get into tactics like stealth hypnosis versus brainwashing, bypasses, total commitment, death or victory. And I suppose when I change the description, which I will, because this AGR will be retitled. Right now I said, I believe it's titled, Like the River Thames. Like the River Thames. Because it's just a river of shit. It's like a giant open-air sewer that flows through London. So, an open-air sewer, a river of shit. So we're going to change that to lamp of the eye. Probably just a couple of quotations in there, like, I can resist anything but temptation. That's Oscar Wilde. And let's see, I believe I have, some things are secret because they are hard to know, and some because they are not fit to utter. And that would be Francis Bacon. And then I guess I've got some notes on something that I'll present next time I run across Dr. Farrell, because he's an expert in like the old Nazi histories or whatever, and he's got some theories on Martin Bormann, and I just don't know if he's ever explored the idea that was put forth by let's see, Ladislas Farga in the 1974 book Aftermath. And he basically maintains that Nazi Party Secretary Martin Bormann held sway over Hitler because Hitler had a bastard child. And Bormann's eldest son was actually Hitler's bastard child. And Hitler had had that bastard child with a young woman named Ushi, I guess. who may have been a nun named Pia. So this is totally speculative. And I believe Borman's eldest son was named Kronzes. So I don't know. That's total speculation. It's something I like to explore with an expert like Dr. Farrell, if he's willing to entertain that idea. My dog is squeaking. She needs to pee. It's hell getting old, but we make it as easy as possible. So I'm going to take a brief intermission, and we'll just let a little bit of the Albany? I don't know how you say that. Albany? It's too early for language. I need to drink more. Tommaso Albolini? I don't know. Tommaso Giovanni Albanini was a Venetian Baroque composer. So, well, enjoy a little piece of that, and I'll return in a moment. I had to be relatively quick about it. Never too early for beer. I don't know if it would be that hateful for you to accuse me of being a drunk. You're welcome to do it. And I might not even call you a liar. do have a limited amount of time because the clock is ticking. Okay. I think I'm going to read a little bit from A Course in Miracles from the Institute for the Foundation for Inner Peace. It's an outstanding book. And this is from part 7 of chapter 15. And we're going to go to 4 of 7. We said before that the ego attempts to maintain and increase guilt, but in such a way that you do not recognize what it would do to you. For it is the ego's fundamental doctrine that what you do to others, you have escaped. The ego wishes no one well. Yet its survival depends on your belief that you are exempt from its evil intentions. It counsels, therefore, that if you are host to it, it will enable you to direct its anger outward, thus protecting you. And thus it embarks on an endless, unrewarding chain of special relationships forged out of anger and dedicated to but one insane belief, that the more anger you invest outside yourself, the safer you become. It is this chain that binds the Son of God to guilt. And it is this chain the Holy Spirit would remove from his holy mind, for the chain of savagery belongs not around the chosen host of God, who cannot make himself host to the ego. In the name of his release, and in the name of him who would release him, let us look more closely at the relationships the ego contrives, and let the Holy Spirit judge them truly. For it is certain that if you will look at them, you will offer them gladly to him. What he can make of them you do not know, but you will become willing to find out if you are willing first to perceive what you have made of them. In one way or the other, or another, every relationship the ego makes is based on the idea that by sacrificing itself, it becomes bigger. The sacrifice, which it regards as purification, is actually the root of its bitter resentment. For it would prefer to attack directly and avoid delaying what it really wants. Yet the ego acknowledges reality as it sees it and recognizes that no one could interpret direct attack as love. Yet to make guilty is direct attack, although it does not seem to be. For the guilty expect attack, and having asked for it, they are attracted to it. In such insane relationships, the attraction of what you do not want seems to be much stronger than the attraction of what you do want. For each one thinks that he has sacrificed something to another and hates him for it. Yet this is what he thinks he wants. He is not in love with the other at all. He merely believes he is in love with sacrifice. And for this sacrifice, which he demands of himself, he demands that the other accept the guilt and sacrifice himself as well. Forgiveness becomes impossible, for the ego believes that to forgive another is to lose him. It is only by attack without forgiveness that the ego can ensure the guilt that holds all its relationships together. And I think that's a very important thought or meditation on the nature of hatred, the nature of bullies, and this insanity that we live through, or even the essence of tyranny. Like, tyranny cannot forgive, it can only condemn. its very nature, its very survival depends on some sort of condemnation, some sort of hatred. And that's to blind ego. I mean, that is the ego that is Satan's influence in this world, that blinds us to the true intention. And I do not claim for speak for God, but the peace, the lamp in the eye, the softness in your eye, the gentle carriage of your being, to meditate on forgiveness and love, is not to invite attack. There is always that constant struggle between the oppressed and the oppressor. That'll never end. That's part of humanity. Which is why a martial art is so important. For the most part in my life I've experienced, I don't think I've had to go into direct conflict or combat too many times. Every time a loaded gun was pointed at me, I was calm. If it's your day to die, well, that's it. Like, to have a suicidal attraction towards death is one thing. But to not fear death is another. And this is what I talk about when I talk about total commitment when you must attack. But I think most people go through their lives without being attacked. Maybe a couple of times somebody gets attacked. I mean, maybe people do experience an attack of some sort or another. Maybe everybody experiences an attack of some sort or another. Perhaps some physical challenge. But if that were the case, then we wouldn't have old people walking around without, some parity of force, like guns. Like, everybody over 55 should have a gun. Well, everybody should have a gun, really. I don't carry weapons, but that's because I drink. It's just It's just like driving a car. You don't drink and drive, and you don't drink and carry weapons. Not a good idea. So you got to learn how to defend yourself in another way. So when you get so irritated by something Doc Larson would say, and you're going to drink a bunch of beet juice and be shitting yourself and punching holes in the wall, you don't have a fucking loaded gun on you at the same time. That's just not prudent. I had a friend, a very dear friend, that had just gotten through medical school, and he was up in, I want to say, Pennsylvania, and I would speak to him once a week. And I imagine it was pretty lonely up there. And medical school It's kind of like a brainwashing. I mean, they break you down, they put you through extreme amounts of hours, and they build you back up into exactly what they want you to be. And he'd have been better off doing what he really loved to do, and that was to blow glass. He could make beautiful pipes and all sorts of different types of glass. And he should have spent his life relaxed, making art and smoking weed. But instead, he had to, I guess, go where he felt pressured to go, to do what society demanded. I mean, he was always a natural healer, a very faithful person, a true believer in God. And this is something he and I both shared. We would speak each other's praises, even though we didn't know each other at the time. We had mutual friends, and yet we would speak highly of one another. And our mutual friends, always thought this was kind of absurd that we both would speak of each other so highly. And then we became very good friends, and I would speak to him once a week. And I suppose all that stress of medical school turns out like a tragic accident. When he's drinking, I spoke to him earlier that day. It was Easter. I spoke to him earlier that day. And I guess that night he had had too much to drink, and he blew his head off with a shotgun. And I sometimes think to myself, what more could I have done? Was there anything different that I could do? I would have given anything for him to have his life. But like a tragic accident, child of God returns home. And even all these years later, I suppose I still have not been able to fully control my emotion. Now, this is a tragic accident, and it clearly causes me some distress. It was not an act of hatred. But wounds me in a personal way that you just can't find in hate speech or whatever the communists, the Marxists, the fascists, the censors, pretend like they're convoluted contortions of language, the arbiters of speech and truth, can determine a series of triggers so offensive, so bold, that it can break your heart or drive you into a frenzy or drive you to commit an act of violence. Generally speaking, what made the Nazis so successful in their rallies, what made Hitler successful, is that groupthink. How you can determine that you've been brainwashed is, first, you're not willing to ask questions. Then you're willing to do things that you would look back on and think that you would never do. So you can tell we're living in a society that's got some brainwashed people in it. And I remember when this whole thing first started, I was at the grocery store and I said to a lady in line as I watched people start to surrender to this nonsense. And I said, I can understand now why the Nazis were so successful in 1933. And I think that stuck with her. And I've been driving every single day to never relent on my position. And it's not going to change. I'm just a real stubborn son of a bitch like that. You know, I don't much feel like going on. It's not my nature to give up either. So I'll tell you how I deal with challenges. I'll smile and nod and wave, and I remember people's name and I call them out by their name. I speak to them on friendly terms every time that I see them. Anytime I'm challenged, I ignore the challenge as if it never existed at all, and I continue right on my path of asking whatever I was going to ask, doing whatever I was going to do, passing however I was going to pass. Which forces an individual who challenges you over some nonsense to escalate. And they can escalate in a couple of different ways. They can verbally escalate. They could probably summon a couple of groupthink allies around to try and put more pressure on you, or they could very rarely are they ever going to commit a stance to violence because they don't know what to expect. So if you totally ignore it, they find, a lot of times people will just simply surrender to how easy it is just to let you do what you want to do. Otherwise, they have to go through this other process of actually challenging you and not allowing you to simply pass and go about your own business. So, for the most part, unhindered. Answer my request or resist the simplicity of my request. Or passing by in a way that would escalate in an attempt to excite me. Now, like I say, verbal challenges, I'm going to ignore them. As if I did not hear them, as if I was deaf to them. Which I am. I'm not even going to recognize nonsense. and I'll continue to proceed. Now, the challenges of force, like I say, require some sort of summoning of create a condition of more force, because cowards do not know how to deal with a direct challenge. They just, I mean, if they're brainwashed supplicants to begin with, they can make some fairly bold statements, but when it comes to an actual challenge, I've known fighters, I mean real fighters, guys that love to fucking beat the shit out of people. They love it. But you wouldn't find them just going beating the shit out of somebody in a Walmart parking lot. Most of the time, if they're going to beat the shit out of somebody, they get their, like, territory, their own little house, you know, like a bar or something that they're in. Well, good morning, John. Thank you. But they would always have their own house, their own area where they were comfortable, where they realized that they were on a favorable ground in which they could beat the shit out of somebody else and not really receive consequence. Or maybe they're accustomed to fighting in bars or something like that. And then there's always the ambush predator that'll use violence against somebody. That'll like scope out an ATM or, you know, hit you in a parking lot or something. The criminal-minded ambush predator, that they're already committed to violence. But by and large, the average person that's just going along their business, that might happen to be brainwashed into some cultish mentality, is not going to meet a challenge, because they're by nature supplicant, and they're going to require some sort of force, and that's either the force of a crowd to try and put some sort of social pressure on you, or they're going to actually require real legitimate force, which they'll have to summon either a group or other enforcers. So in this type of situation, either you just walk away typically. But if, well, I'm not going to say if, because I could give you a lot of ways to deal with the if, but that's not the lamp of the eye that I'm talking about today. I'm talking about the lamp of the eye. I'm talking about how you avoid those types of situations, how you build that spirit of community, because you do not compromise. And it doesn't matter to me if somebody's wearing a mask or not. They might be forced to do that by their job or their work, which is pretty disgusting. And when you're smiling and waving at them and you've never changed your position, they grow somewhat resentful, not towards you, but they grow resentful towards the authority figures that are making them do something so fucking obviously silly, because you've demonstrated that on a daily basis and you've brought no force of ego against them. You're really happy to see them. You call them out by name. You wave to them every day. You're polite. You smile. You could pass somebody that you don't know that's wearing a mask and polite and smile. Say, good morning, how are you? And wave. And it would be confusing to them that you're no threat. You're not sick. So it brings in conflict this programming, this brainwashing. I talk a little bit about how soldiers organize into units, how police organize into units, how gangs have different stances of attack. But that, again, is not the point today. It's not the point today to speak of initiative or battle. What I meant earlier about the school shooter or the mass shooter, again, in familiar ground and familiar territory. Like, a school shooter is not going to go to another school to shoot the place up. They're going to shoot in their own school for whatever reasons they have. One of these spree killers, one of these mass murderers, one of these shooters that go into a mall or whatever and shoot the place up, or a grocery store. It's probably somewhere that they've been before. They're not going to drive out of town to some fucking random location and start blasting away. So my point is that humans by nature are familial. Like they tend to stay towards places where they're familiar, and when they're in their element, they can be a little bit more bold. If they have numbers, they can be a little bit more bold. So you upset that balance by not allowing submission. You do not submit to fear or coercion. And people around you will not submit to fear or coercion because you're not fearful or coerced. And everything, if you're trying to look at this as a situation that's going to be, solved by, how many people do you kill to get what you want? That's not the way that it goes. That's the ego telling you that you go outside yourself and they can't bring harm to you because you brought harm to them first. That you're protected because you are the strong and they are the weak. And it couldn't be further from the truth. Eventually, that type of shit catches up with you. People will organize against you if you have that type of mind. And it is the natural way for it to have its conclusion. Because ultimately, people don't like to be coerced. They don't like to be put in states of fear. They don't like to be bullied. So you think that control is the thing you miss? I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. Control is the thing you miss. I miss no control. The only control that you really truly have in life is over your own actions. And that you need control. I don't need control. I find it actually easier to kind of go as the river flows. Surrender control, but I will not surrender my position or my stance. Oh, absolutely, you have control over yourself. And we should always endeavor to be more disciplined, more controlled. I lack self-discipline, absolutely. But, we're all human. But there's no way I'm going to let some other son of a bitch exert control over me. Fuck him. Especially when it comes to slavery or what they intend to do to my body, my life, my temple. Oh yeah, you'd be fucking with the wrong dude over here. Because it's just not going to go that way. It's not going to go that way. That's an illusion. To have control over yourself, that's an illusion. No, free will is the thing that we are granted by God. That's the entire exercise of life, and one that completes the wholeness of God, because God is perfect. God is is perfection. So for God to be complete, there must be imperfection, and therefore control of your emotions and not your actions. I suppose it is not wrong to feel, to be human, to weep when we are sad, to love, to have brotherly love, to have romantic love, to mourn for loss, have a period of grief. There is righteous anger. There is righteous indignation. Not to be a slave to your emotions, to be aware that they are there and experience the wholeness of what they are, but get control ultimately. Let that intensity of emotion pass. Feel it, but don't be consumed by it. Have a willingness to step outside of that pressure and resolve yourself to a more loving, more harmonious, more easy state of being. So it does require discipline to have control over your emotions, because it's easy to get pissed off about things, and it's easy to let that anger, it's easy to carry it with you. I mean, hatred is like to use a metaphor that I think was used by Picard in Star Trek Next Generation episode, I believe it was called The Wounding, perhaps, where there was another Starfleet ship captain that was going out and destroying the Cardassians. And he was, decorated many times by Starfleet in his duties in war, but they had created the conditions of peace. I mean, not really, because, the other captain wasn't wrong about what the Cardassians were up to. But Picard said hatred becomes like an old leather chair, and you settle into it and you become comfortable with it, and then it just seems so natural you don't know anything else. It becomes your comfortable position to be in a state of hatred. But it could also be a very comfortable position to be in a state of love. And I think one requires more effort than the other, because forgiveness is not necessarily easy. So, control of your emotions, I think, could better be described as surrendering your undesirable emotions or your undesirable feelings and turning them over to God. Like giving them away instead of forcing yourself into the difficulty of being disciplined enough to control them, but the ease of giving them away, returning you to a state of peace. So, I think I'll tell a little story here about when I was meditating. I was reading the Book of Five Rings by Musashi, and I was also meditating on Luke at the same time. And I was walking, and a young man was approaching me, and I was meditating on trying to hold these two thoughts in my mind. One was this in Luke about the spirit of goodwill, about peace among all men of goodwill on earth, something like that. And the principle in the Five Rings where you would be fully committed to cutting through your enemy. And holding this dichotomous idea in my mind almost, it was a challenge. And as this young man was approaching me, I had in my spirit still this thought of cutting through my enemy. And he walked around me. And I thought to myself, this is not a proper attitude. Because if you have the wrong attitude towards fighting or towards bearing, a manner of being, your bearing, you'll run into a mountain. But if you have the proper attitude towards fighting or a manner of bearing or a manner of being, you'll walk to the top of the mountain. And perhaps this day he walked around. But there would be a day if I carried in my mind that manner of being that I would walk into a mountain. And I realized what I had done. And I turned to him and he asked me, "Do you live here?" And I said, "No, I was passing through a neighborhood." And I pointed, I said, "I live there." I immediately changed my disposition from this meditation on combat to what I believe to be a more proper sense of being for the way that I want to be treated, the golden rule, the way that I want the community, everybody, to be able to enjoy and be, not to be threatened. And I said, "Do you live here?" And he said, "No, I live there." And he points over his shoulder to where he is. And I presented him with like some sort of ending greeting, some pleasant goodbye. And we departed. Because I didn't want to end that encounter without having it be resolved. And in my mind, it wasn't resolved until I had basically apologized and crafted a more appropriate manner of being. And then, so I wouldn't appear or be threatening. And this was better for everybody. So I'm gonna end this AGR today. I'm surprised. Wow, I think I'm already in an hour. Thanks for everybody that's popped into the chat. Lazar, John, always good to see you. Peace be with you. It's been Hank, your Pajama Scholar.